Welcome to the Successful Nonprofits Bonus Break Edition. I'm your host, Dolph Goldenburg. Today, I am going to share the key to dealing with the jerk or the schmuck in your workplace. And my friends, these insights are actually from Dr. Jodie Foster, the author of The Schmuck in My Office, who has also been on this podcast. Now, you may not know that Jodie actually came into our book club last year. It's one of the cool things about the Successful Nonprofits Book Club. Oftentimes, the authors will stop by for the last 30 minutes and answer questions. And one of the questions that we asked Dr. Foster was, hey, your book came out about 4, maybe 5 years ago. What would you write differently today than you did when it was first published? And did we ever get a good answer? Because she shared something with us that's not in her book, that's not on the podcast that she has done. And friends, I am going to share that with you. Before I do, though, let me make sure that you know about both the bonus break and me. The bonus break is a short episode you can listen to while taking a tea break, and you will get the added bonus of making you and your nonprofit stronger. And me, I'm a consultant, coach, and confidant for leaders at small and large organizations across the country. I bring 3 decades of leadership and consulting experience, building, growing, leading, and repairing organizations. And that's why I bring you these bonus breaks. So that way I'm able to share some of my hard-learned and sometimes painfully learned wisdom from the last 3 decades. So today, when I share with you more about what Dr. Jodie Foster told our book club, I am going to make sure that you walk away with her 5-step process for dealing with disruptive behavior, a simple outline for having that very difficult conversation. And by the way, at the end, I'm going to share with you how you can access a worksheet that will put all of this together. Now, last year, when Dr. Foster first talked about these 5 steps, literally, she was doing it in the book club, and I was scribbling furiously, taking notes. It literally was like getting a near private or quasi-private master class from Dr. Foster. And of course, I immediately started to put this framework to work in my own life, both my personal life and my professional life. And I also started to share it with some of my clients. So I had a coaching client who was struggling with a direct report whose behavior, quite frankly, was so disruptive that it was sucking hours of her time every single week. She was dealing with her direct report's workplace outbursts. She was having to field complaints from other team members that had to work with this person. And then, of course, in addition to those complaints, she was also helping her team members emotionally process the disruption. Now, if you've ever managed someone who has difficult behavior, who has outbursts, you know what this is like. You know how hard it is, not just to contain those outbursts, but then to contain the fallout that happens with the team members and volunteers and others. So Dr. Foster shared with us that there are 5 things that we should do whenever we encounter a disruptive person like this. The first thing she told us is check yourself first. We should be asking ourselves, why is this behavior disrupting my ability to work? And, sometimes a person's behavior irritates us or disrupts us because of our own past experiences. And sometimes, not always, others don't experience the same frustration from this person that we're calling the jerk or the schmuck in our workplace. So her first point, and it's a good one for us all to remember, let's check ourselves first. Her second is what she calls naming the beast. Dr. Foster is very clear that we need to be able to describe the behavior, to name it in concrete terms. So that way we can actually identify what needs to be changed. So she gave us a few questions to ask. First of all, what exactly is causing me trouble? Her second question is, what part of this am I actually having trouble with? And her third question is, what about this behavior, or specifically what behavior, is abhorrent behavior to me? And once again, The point of this step is just so we can concretely and fully describe the behavior. So that way, if you're talking to the individual who's exhibiting that behavior, or you're talking to someone else about it, you can very solidly describe it. The third thing Dr. Foster told us to do is to tap into what she calls our empathy muscle. She was very clear that we don't want to excuse or give a pardon to or condone that schmuck like behavior, but by seeking to understand the person, by trying to think, hey, what might have caused the person to act like this? What maybe happened in the person's past that caused that person to act like this? Also ask yourself, do I think maybe this is the person's baseline character? Do they act like this in other places? Do I think they act like this at home or the grocery store or their civic organization? And the last question that Dr. Foster challenged us with, and I say challenged because this is a pretty big challenge if you want to tap into your empathy muscle, to ask ourselves, when have I behaved like this? And I'll share with you, friends, I've done that recently. Whenever I've encountered a person who I find disruptive or difficult to deal with, I ask myself, well, when have I behaved like this? And then often I'll kind of go down this rabbit hole. Okay, yeah, I behaved like this about a month ago, and here's why I did, and here's what kind of triggered it. And it helps me have some empathy. While that person is not me, that person is an individual in their own right. When I acknowledge there have been times I've acted like this, I'm better able to empathize with someone like this. Her fourth step is for us to call it out. Dr. Foster draws a line here, and she says that bad behavior will continue unless we address it. Now, that's no secret, and so often as managers, we think, oh, I'm going to ignore this and maybe it'll go away in a day. And then in a week, it hasn't gone away. Maybe it's even gotten a little bit worse. And we'll say, well, the person's review is coming up. Maybe I'll talk about it in the person's review. Or, oh, we've got that biweekly check-in in a couple weeks. Maybe we'll talk about it in the biweekly check-in. But it is imperative to intervene as early and as soon as possible. Now, when telling us to call it out early, Dr. Foster also recognized that some situations, don't allow us to talk to the person right away. Maybe they stormed out of the office. Or, maybe they did it as part of the last meeting of the day on Zoom and now everybody has dropped off Zoom. But it is human nature to avoid difficult conversations. So let's not look for excuses to avoid the conversation. Let's look for reasons to have the conversation about that disruptive behavior. And her final tip was for us to be concise. So when it comes time for us to have that conversation, it doesn't need to be a 30-minute conversation. It honestly does not even need to be a 5-minute conversation. What's important is to describe that concrete behavior. Keep in mind, that was the very first step. So you can quickly and easily describe it, and then you can explain why that behavior needs to stop. Now, friends, Dr. Foster also shared with us a 5-step template for the conversation. And I'm just going to literally read this to you. Number 1, I value you. Number 2, you are good at what you do. Number 3, you are a boon to the organization and we want you here. 4, but this thing you do or things you do is causing so much trouble that if you continue them, I'm going to have to let you go. And number 5, if you can't stop on your own, let me try to help you. Tell me what you need. There's a couple things I want to note. Again, as Dr. Foster was sharing this in our book club, I literally was scribbling furiously so I could get all of this down. But when I think about number 4, when you say, but this thing you do is causing so much trouble that if you continue them, I'm going to have to let you go. I always want to remind you, friends, that we don't do legal advice here, but make sure you dot your legal I's and cross your legal T's before telling someone that you're going to let them go. I don't want you to get in any kind of legal trouble. So again, make sure you do talk to an attorney and do that the right way. But also, I loved her 5th point in that conversation outline, where we say to someone, if you can't stop on your own, let me try to help you. tell me what you need. That that is such a sign that we've tapped into our empathy muscle and that we care about the other person. And when we're showing that we genuinely care about someone, even when we're having to confront them, it can be so much easier. Now, if you recall earlier in this bonus break, I was sharing with you a little bit about a coaching client who I actually sent this to because she was really struggling with a direct report who was having outbursts, and she was also struggling managing the fallout of those outbursts. Well, I'll share with you, she did all 5 steps and she used the conversation outline. And almost overnight, the time she spent managing this workplace jerk dropped dramatically. And she has been able to focus on the important work of being an executive director. And that's why I want to leave you with a quick 5-step summary. Check yourself first, name the beast, find your empathy, call it out, and be concise. Now, my friends, if a worksheet is helpful for you, we have put a worksheet at the show notes at successfulnonprofits.com. It has both these 5 steps and actually with space for you to write in answers on each one, as well as the conversation outline. If you found this bonus break helpful, I hope that you will open up your phone and rate and review the podcast. That, my friends, is our bonus break for this week. I hope that you have gained some insight to help you and your nonprofit thrive. And now, time for the quick disclaimer. I am not an accountant nor an attorney, and neither I nor the consulting practice provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. This podcast is for informational purposes only and also should not be relied on for tax, legal, or accounting advice. Please, if that is what you need, find a licensed, credentialed, and qualified professional in your area.